Hey everyone! Before we get into it, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us where and when you're watching. Doing that helps YouTube make sure more stories like this one find their way to you. No headstone was left for them, no name or date. Just a small hollow in the ground by the edge of the woods, where the moss has taken over the stone, and the quietness is heavier than the mist. People in town still say you can hear scratching from beneath the dirt at night, but it's just a folk tale, until you start to dig deeper. Until you realize that the town council paid to have the record sealed, that the midwife vanished the same week, and that a single torn page from the family Bible was found buried in a jar next to a child-sized coffin with 4 words scrawled in a shaky hand: born wrong, buried right. The Holloway family was never really accepted in town, but they were tolerated. Barely. For generations, they lived tucked away in a dilapidated house off County Road 12, surrounded by thick forest and rusted barbed wire. No one could ever recall seeing them at church, school, or the feed store, but everyone knew the stories. The hushed tales of babies born without eyes, children who never spoke, cousins marrying cousins, and a man known only as Uncle Eli, who hadn't been seen in the daylight since 1937. In 1961, the county finally tried to get involved. An anonymous tip was sent to the sheriff's office, claiming the Holloways had buried a living child behind their barn. It also stated that this wasn't the first one. What the deputies found, or more accurately, didn't find, was enough to close the case by the end of the week. No exhumation, no charges, no follow-up. But in 1998, a box turned up. It was found in the attic of a now-abandoned courthouse, sealed with twine, and simply labeled Holloway evidence. Inside were hand-drawn family trees, a faded photo of a baby with its mouth sewn shut, and a soil sample that tested positive for human blood type AB negative, a match for the one living Holloway known to be in the county. And she hasn't said a word in over 60 years. The Holloway family tree doesn't branch out, it folds back in on itself in ways that even experienced genealogists found hard to map. A 1972 psychiatric evaluation of the surviving daughter, carried out under court order, described her as cognitively distant, dissociative, and filled with trauma too profound to unravel. She was 7 years old at the time. Her hands were covered in scars, and her drawings were exclusively of coffins. But let's rewind. The Holloways first appeared in Kentucky land records in 1811 when a man named Silas Holloway bought 82 acres of wooded land using Confederate money, a full 30 years before the Confederacy even existed. Local historians now believe that the name Holloway was chosen, not inherited, an alias selected for its isolation. Even back then, locals noticed how few outsiders ever went onto Holloway land and returned with stories. Most said the family never left the homestead, not even for supplies. They grew their own food, raised their own animals, and buried their own dead. An entry in a traveling priest's journal from 1849 provides one of the earliest outside accounts of the family. He wrote, "I was denied entry 3 times, each time by the same pale-faced boy, although he gave a different name each time. The 3rd time, he claimed to be the father. No priest ever returned. Over time, a pattern emerged. Local doctors quietly refused to treat Holloway women, citing unusual birthing abnormalities and moral qualms. School teachers remembered children who enrolled without birth certificates and left before their first winter. One boy, Ezekiel, attended for 2 weeks and never spoke, just stared at the chalkboard and drooled. When the principal tried a home visit, he came back ashen and resigned that very night. He was later found in his attic, hanging by a belt, with a child's dress nailed to the wall behind him. By 1958, the family was down to 7 members, all living in a 3-room house with boarded-up windows and a stench so bad that neighbors filed health complaints. The youngest girl, Mary Eliza, was seen just once by a census taker who reported she was covered in bruises, walked with a limp, and refused to blink. Mary Eliza disappeared within the year. And that's when the rumors started, that she had been buried alive in the backyard as a punishment, a sacrifice, or a warning to the others. The official cause of Mary Eliza's disappearance was listed as unknown. But if you ask anyone who grew up within 15 miles of the Holloway property, they'll tell you exactly what happened. Some say she was punished for talking to a boy in town. Others claim she was born with a deformity the family believed was a sign of possession. But the most enduring theory, whispered by those who still live near the ruins, is that Mary Eliza began to remember things she wasn't supposed to. And in a family like the Holloways, memory could be deadly. Here's what we do know. A neighbor, Clara Rowe, filed 3 complaints in the spring of 1959. In each one, she described muffled screams at night, the sound of dirt being shoveled, and a child's voice singing from beneath the ground. No action was ever taken. The sheriff, who happened to be a distant Holloway cousin, dismissed it as female hysteria, but Clara kept a journal. One entry, dated June 3, reads, "I saw the girl, pale, dirty, staring out from the cornfield. Her mouth was moving, but no sound came out. The next night, the field was on fire. Then, nothing, just silence." Clara was found dead 2 weeks later. Heart failure at 43. In 1975, a construction crew clearing part of the Holloway land found something the family never reported, a small, brick-lined pit behind the barn. Inside were child-sized shackles, bones later confirmed to be from at least 2 juveniles, and a rusted metal plate engraved with a date, May 17, 1959, the day Mary Eliza was last seen. The pit was quickly filled in. No investigation followed, and for years, no one spoke of it again. Then came the audio tape, found in 1998 with the courthouse evidence box. The reel-to-reel recording is only 3 minutes long, but the sounds on it are impossible to forget. A child's voice singing off-key, a woman whispering in what sounds like a different language, and finally, 32 seconds of rhythmic thudding, like fists against a wooden lid. Then silence. Forensics determined the tape was unedited and authentic. The soil sample taken from beneath the pit matched the child's blood type, and yet, authorities dismissed it as insufficient evidence. Some truths simply rot in the ground, never seeing the light. The Holloways weren't just a family. They were a self-contained unit, a bloodline with no exits. And like any system left to decompose in isolation, something unnatural grew within it, something that didn't care about right or wrong, only survival. When anthropologists reviewed the Holloway records in the early 2000s, they uncovered unsettling patterns. 7 confirmed generations. Births happening within the same household. Names repeating over and over, Silas, Eli, Mary, Ruth, a cycle like broken prayers. And most chillingly, nearly every Holloway birth after 1890 was the result of in-family unions. Not just cousins, but brothers, fathers, and uncles. One expert, Dr. Nathaniel Greaves, called the case a genetic feedback loop so severe it practically weaponized itself. He added that the mutations seen in medical notes, webbed fingers, missing ears, fused jaws, were consistent with multiple recessive traits doubling up over time. In simple terms, the Holloways only bred with other Holloways, and the children paid the price. But this wasn't ignorance. It was a ritual. Buried in a waterproof tin near the creek, a handwritten family gospel was found with a passage that read, "Purity comes from within, from our own, not the stranger, not the poisoned blood." The gospel, written in a mix of biblical prose and rural dialect, mentioned a punishment known as the waking burial, reserved for children who looked too far outside or were born unclean. The practice was described as a cleansing of the bloodline through silence and soil. It doesn't take much imagination to understand what that means. But perhaps the most disturbing entry is one dated 1946, signed simply, Mother. It reads, "Today we laid down our Ruth. She fought the sleep, bit her tongue clean through, but we sang, and she stopped. Now she is still. She will not wander like the others." There is no record of a Ruth Holloway being born in that decade. Over time, the family began to disappear, quietly, with no funerals or obituaries. No one knows exactly how the last few Holloways died, or if any of them escaped. By 1982, the property was deemed hostile terrain and officially abandoned. The house stood rotting until 1993, when a fire of undetermined cause burned it to the ground. All that remains today is the foundation, the charred beams of the barn, and a single wooden cross with no name. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? The last confirmed Holloway died in 2006. Her name was Sarah Lee Holloway, and she had been living in a state-run psychiatric facility for almost 4 decades. Officially diagnosed with complex trauma, nonverbal psychosis, and cultural delusions, she never spoke a single word during her confinement, but she drew constantly. Over 700 drawings were found after her death. Each one was made with a single red crayon, and almost every one featured the same elements: a child standing in a hole, adults watching from above, and a symbol carved into the sky, 3 circles in a triangle, always with a 4th, smaller one crossed out. No one could identify what it meant. But in 2009, a local historian found a wood-carved post from the Holloway property that bore the same symbol etched over what looked like a sealed well. The well has since been filled with concrete. Sarah's autopsy revealed something that still unnerves forensic experts today. She was born with a double uterus, a rare condition usually caused by genetic mutation. But even more chillingly, her tongue had been surgically split and sewn back together twice. Medical staff confirmed this alteration didn't happen under their care. It had happened before she was institutionalized, sometime between the ages of 5 and 10. What kind of family performs surgery on a child's tongue, then stays silent for the rest of her life? Sarah's last drawing, completed just days before her death, showed a group of figures kneeling around a box buried in the ground. A single line of text was scrawled beneath it: "She hears us still." Authorities dismissed it as gibberish, but in 2011, amateur paranormal investigators trespassed onto the old Holloway property. What they recorded is still debated to this day. The footage, grainy and hard to verify, shows a deep sinkhole surrounded by bones, mostly animal, but not all. A faint melody can be heard in the background, though none of the crew remembered hearing it in real time. When the video was analyzed, audio specialists found a child's voice embedded beneath the static, singing off-key, repeating one phrase: "I'm not asleep." It's tempting to dismiss stories like this as folklore, small-town myths twisted by time and fear. But every myth starts with a truth. And the deeper you dig into the Holloway family's history, the more truth you find buried beneath the surface. In 1979, a university geneticist named Dr. Harold Renner quietly conducted an unsanctioned study on inbreeding in rural Appalachian communities. His notes were never published, but decades later, a scanned copy was leaked online by a former grad student. In it, Dr. Renner identifies an unnamed family that perfectly matches the Holloway's profile: 7 generations, isolated property, repeating names, and multiple children buried in unmarked graves. He notes severe genetic collapse and the deliberate concealment of birth defects. The most damning entry reads: "The youngest female subject exhibited symptoms of prenatal trauma. No medical attention was ever sought. Locals suggest she was given back to the ground. Given back like an offering." Further investigation reveals that the Holloways may have been followers of an offshoot religious cult, one that rejected outside blood, medicine, and government authority. This sect, mentioned briefly in Kentucky court archives as the fold of the first blood, believed that purity came only from internal union, that bringing in outside blood was inviting decay. Their scripture, found in fragments and oral accounts, often talks about the cleansing sleep, the child in the earth, and the watchers beneath the corn. None of the known members of this sect are alive today, at least not publicly. And yet, the stories persist. In 2015, a hiker passing through the area reported finding what he thought was a child's grave in the middle of a forest clearing. The grave was fresh. Too fresh. He described it as no more than 2 feet deep with small wooden crosses circling the edge. No markings, no names. He came back with authorities, but by then, the site was gone, flattened and covered with pine needles, with no sign of a disturbance. The hiker was later found wandering a nearby field, barefoot and muttering the same phrase over and over. They buried her awake. We've since verified the GPS coordinates he submitted that day. They lead to the far edge of the Holloway property line, just past the ruins of the barn, where Mary Eliza was last seen. There's a reason towns like this stay quiet. Not out of fear, at least not the kind you can name, but out of memory. Out of the knowledge that some truths, once brought to light, don't go back into the ground so easily. The Holloway family is gone. Their house is rubble. Their names have been erased from census logs, grave markers, and even local newspapers. But what they did and what they believed isn't gone. It lingers. Not just in the stories or the strange symbols carved into tree trunks near the creek. Not just in the police reports that no longer exist or the court files mysteriously lost in a flood. It lingers in the land itself, in the way animals refuse to cross it, in how the wind seems to stop the moment you step over the old fence line. In the silence. Locals still won't say the name Holloway aloud. Some claim the soil itself is cursed. Others say it's still hungry. That the children who were buried alive were never meant to die, not completely. That they were sealed away in a state between sleep and silence, what the family called the stillness, and that sometimes on certain nights, when the fog is thick and the moon is low, you can hear them stirring beneath the earth, scratching, not screaming, just scratching. And maybe that's the worst part. That what was done wasn't an accident. It wasn't madness or desperation. It was tradition. A family preserving its purity at any cost. A bloodline folding in on itself like a dark flower, hiding its rot from the world until it was too late. In the end, we don't know how many children were buried. We don't know how many survived, or if any of them ever made it beyond those woods. But we do know this: one child was buried alive, and nobody stopped it. She wasn't lost, she was chosen. And perhaps beneath the moss and ash and silence, she still remembers who did it and waits. Thanks for watching. If this story disturbed you, share it with someone you know and let us know in the comments, what do you think really happened on Holloway land? Don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are more stories like this buried in the past, just waiting to be unearthed.